I want to talk about um, a deep trance medium, Steve Woods. In my opinion, there aren't that many deep trance mediums, really good ones, in the world. But Steve has been doing this for 25 to 30 years. He's was living in Maryland for most all that time, and he's just now moved to New Jersey. And he's we do two events with him every month. And the first event is called the Spirit Guide Circle. And I started sitting with him. He would come to Arlington Metaphysical Chapel in Arlington, Virginia, and I have a daughter who lives about 15 miles from there. So when I would come to visit her, I'd stay over on a Monday night, and the guide circle was set up that one of your guys, he'd go into trance, he'd be gone, his soul is out of the body. And one at a time, according to where you were seated, you would give an affirmation. Tom Newman, give my love and light to the spirit manifestation. And then one of my guides would come in and then answer three personal questions. I found that to be very a wonderful experience, very good experience. And it's not always the same guide each time, which is fine. I figure that your spirit team knows what you need best. And so they'll choose which guide should come in and say hello. And then, as I said, they will answer three personal questions. And the whole thing is recorded. It's done over Zoom, the audio part of Zoom. And then one of my colleagues here in Santa Fe, he'll get the recording the next day, and then he'll break it down according to individuals, so that your conversation with your guide will be emailed to you. And that's generally the second Thursday night of each month. So physically, I did that for about 6 years. And after I experienced it the first time, then I started a campaign to get him to come to Santa Fe. And, I said, I brought him Indian pottery, any little thing that would resemble Santa Fe, I would bring it to him and say, you need to come to Santa Fe. So he felt an allegiance to this church until 2019. And that changed, that relationship changed. And so I got him to come out here, and people just fell in love with him. He's very humble, very genuine as a medium, and he did a terrific job, as did his team. He did 3 workshops. Now, I've been bringing in external mediums and teachers for about 15 years. I've been here in Santa Fe 10 years, and then I was doing that in Sarasota also. So I said to him, before a teacher leaves our presence, I try to lock them into the next year visit, because the really good teachers, a lot of them get booked up pretty fast. So I said, is there anything we can do other than workshops, because everyone does workshops, pretty much everyone does. So he said, what do you think about spirit coming in and teaching the workshop? Well, my back leg started thumping on the floor, like a dog does. It's got a real good meal coming. I said, oh, that sounds wonderful. So we did that. We did that in 2020. Now, that was when the virus came to visit. So he stayed home, and we just did everything by the audio part of Zoom. Well, the first person to come in to speak to us was Isis. And she spoke. She was a soul speaker. She spoke for an hour and a half on the subject of soulmates. I thought Isis and Horus and all those folks, I thought they were mythology. But checking with one of my teachers, he said, no, they were real individuals. So the second night, which was this was the latter part of May, the second night we had a group of ascended masters. Mother Mary came in and spoke. First time I'd ever heard her speak. Yogananda, Serapis Bey, and there were 12 of them altogether. I don't remember all the names at the moment. That was outstanding. And then the third night, which was on Memorial Day, the last Monday of May, we had our forefathers. And we heard George Washington first, and we heard Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt. We heard Harriet Tubman, she was in the Underground Railroad, and she was an amazing speaker. We heard Neil Armstrong. He was the last person to speak, the astronaut. And it was funny, he says, "I don't know what I'm doing here." He'd only been in spirit for 6 years, but he had things to say. They all spoke about 8 minutes. And it was interesting. Washington said, he said, "I never believed in slavery, but my father gave me my own slaves when I was 11. And he said, and that was a time where you had to be very careful rejecting a practice that was done by a lot of people that in the area you lived." So I think in his will, he freed his slaves. But something he said to us, he said he's not reincarnated. He said, "I feel I can do more good on this side of life, the spirit side, than I can on being on the earth." And he also said that he served 2 terms as president. I never knew that. So after the call was over, I went and looked it up, and sure enough, he'd served 2 terms as president. Martin Luther King was another good speaker, and it was outstanding. So Steve and I talked about setting things up for the following year. And I said, this thing about spirit doing the teaching, I said, that's just a wonderful experience. Very few people have that available to them. And he said, "What do you think about doing a guide circle and a spirit talk every month?" And I said, "That would be outstanding." So since May of 2020, it's been 3.5 years, we have done it that way. Every month, we've had both experiences. And with the guide circle, we can take up to 30. And basically, people contact me. Steve's in trance, so I'm like the co-host. But they'll contact me prior to the time of the event and say, "I want to attend the guide circle." The fee is $30 for either experience, which I consider to be pretty reasonable. One of the most dramatic, and Steve records them. He sends us the recording, and we make CDs, and then people purchase the CDs for a reasonable fee. People from all over the country. So probably one of my most dramatic spirit talks I heard was December of 2020. It was the family of Jesus. Now, I've always had a great respect for Jesus. I've never worshiped him. I've never put him on a pedestal. I always felt that he was a great master teacher. I never believed, in a lot of the Orthodox dogma about him. So Mary came in and spoke first. She was a lovely, lovely soul. And she told us about some of the major things that happened in her life. And then Joseph came in. And one of the things that really surprised me with Joseph, I've read the New Testament as being a metaphysical minister for 17 years. I could really never get into the Old Testament. I liked Genesis, but the rest of the Old Testament was just things that I wasn't interested in. But the New Testament, I had read it. And Joseph said, "I was a follower of the teachings of the East." So I thought, wow, I've never heard that before. In fact, I've never heard Joseph trance to anybody. and I've been listening to trance work for 60 years. So he said that he had a teacher named Andrakis Zarati, and he learned a great deal from him, and said he lived in Nepal, which it turns out to be Bhutan at that time was part of Nepal, but he lived in what is now Bhutan. Then Jesus had 4 younger brothers. And so they each came in and spoke. James was the oldest. He was 5 years younger than Jesus, but he was the oldest of the other 4. And so he said, Jesus and I looked very similar. We could have been passed as twins. And he said, and I don't know if the truth is not sacred, is it? Or the truth is sacred, I guess. But I'm not going to be afraid to tell you what I believe to be the truth. It's up for you to believe it or not. You know, that's your choice. But Jesus didn't die on the cross. We asked Reverend Dorothy Flexer was the trumpet medium that I grew up with, and her teacher was Dr. Charles Davis, and I went to classes with them for 33 years every week. And so I asked, when I was 11, Mary and Jesus ever trance through somebody? I thought it would be fascinating to. They said no, they're too advanced to do that. And I said, okay. So I believed that for up until about a year ago. But anyway, Jesus did not die on the cross. Dr. Davis told us that he put himself into a deep self-induced trance, and he took on the appearance of death. He was, after he was taken down, he was crucified. He was taken down and put into a burial cave that was owned by Joseph of Arimathea. He was Mary's uncle. And the family came after a week of him being there, and they took his body back to Nazareth in the north part of Israel. I found out later that he needed 6 months to get his strength back to recover. So he asked James, the next oldest brother, to put on his clothes and go out into the community and impersonate him. And I think that was so his followers would not be discouraged, because when people were crucified, they were almost always, you didn't come down off the cross until you were dead. So he was very concerned about people being upset. And so James said he had a favorite, he liked red, he had a favorite red sweatshirt, and he said, I'd put that on, I'd go out in the community and, pretend to be him until he got well enough to do it on his own. Another spirit talk, and we've heard from teachers from all over the world. Madame Blavatsky, heard from Hermes Trismegistus. He was the one that came up with the Hermetic principles. Aristotle, just a number of people. Each month there would be a different talk, and they would get between 4 and 6 speakers to come in and talk to us. And Steve's got a very he's been doing this so long that there are a lot of different voice sounds that can come from his vocal box. Women can come through and sound like a woman, and children would sound like a younger person, an older person would sound like an older person. About a year and a half ago, I said to Steve, and this has turned out to be just an amazing experience for a lot of people. But I said, do you think we'd ever get a chance to interview any of these higher spiritual beings? He goes, well, I don't know. We've never done that before. Let me ask. His doctor is Dr. Unku. He's an Egyptian. So about 2 months later, he called me and he said, oh, guess what? They've agreed to let you all interview some of these people, and Mother Mary is the first one who's volunteered. I said, fantastic. So for the last year, with very little exception, we have interviewed, I'll tell you, I had written this down for somebody else, but I'll tell you the people we've interviewed and what happens. Spirit had one request. They said, we want just one person to ask the questions. And I know that is from an energetic point of view. You know, it's tough enough trancing through a different body, you know, a physical body. Most of these people been a long time since they were in a physical body. And we said that'd be okay. And so since I was the co-host, it just fell to me to be the one to ask the questions. So people would send me their questions. I would sort them and eliminate the duplications. And very seldom do we get an inappropriate question. Like what's Hitler doing or something like that. You know, that wouldn't apply to most people. But the people that we have interviewed in the past year, we've interviewed Mother Mary 3 times, Jesus twice, Joseph once, Buddha twice, Andronicus Sarati, the teacher. He was Joseph's teacher and Jesus' teacher 2 times, Hiawatha once, Leonardo da Vinci once. He was very funny. I said to him, I said, you know, the Mona Lisa is probably the most famous painting that's ever been done. He goes, yeah, but the model was terrible to work with. You know, he said she was so negative, nothing I could do would please her, and all of that. He said, I like to paint on wood or on canvas. And he said, you may have heard a rumor that I painted my portrait on a piece of wood. And then I painted, after it dried, I painted her portrait on top of on mine, just to bring more positive energy to the surface. He was very funny. Archangel Gabriel twice, we talked to him. Metatron, who is the voice of God, once. Hermes Trismegistus once, and a fellow by the name of Thoth, one of the 12 souls that were originally created. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So it's been absolutely amazing. And what, you know, many questions that have been asked of these folks, they have said, yeah, I would say, is that true? You know, stories about you, is that true? Like I asked Jesus one time, he said, I want to bring to you some high-level spiritual people to work with you. And he said, like John the Baptist. And I said, well, that's great. I was thinking about John the Baptist. I said, is it true that Herod had him put to death because of a conflict he had with Herod's wife? You know, if you remember, the story is that their daughter, you know, was a pretty famous dancer, and she danced for Herod. And then as a favor, he said, what do you want? He said, she said, I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Jesus said, no, that's a myth. He said, they're using the Bible to change history, the course of history. And one thing I can say, you know, about these speakers, they're all very humble, and they're all very honest. And they've shared some really personal things with us. Some of them that I don't repeat out of respect for them. But nevertheless, we've got one coming up this coming Thursday night. His name is Osri. He's going to, and what they do now in the last 3 or 4 months, they speak for about 15 minutes on whatever they want to speak on, 15, 20 minutes, and then they answer questions for an hour and a half. And this guy is going to speak on the subject of multidimensional beings. I don't have a clue what multidimensional beings are. I don't. So I'm very interested. And the other thing about him that is so unusual is he is one of the first souls created. Now, if I can tell you a real quick story, I think you'll find this interesting. And then we can go to questions and answers if you want. I had asked Spirit years ago, 15 years ago, we worked with, there was a lady down in Albuquerque who tranced the Archangel Gabriel. And we didn't learn anything about archangels in Sarasota, but I got to know a lot about them through working with he went by the name of Benu, which means messenger. And I said, well, how old are our souls? Because we are the soul. I know every one of you, I'm sure, is aware of that. We are the soul, and we use the physical body just as our earth suit, to have a lifetime on the earth. He said 3 billion years ago, Prime Source, that's the name he uses for God, he said the energy in the spirit world is unconditional love. And Prime Source wanted to experience a different energy. And so Prime Source went to a reservoir of divine energy and pulled fragments of energy away from the whole, and each fragment became a soul. And he said there's no new souls being made, but we were also put into soul groups of 144. I said, okay, well, about 6 months ago, and that's what I've taught. I've taught that for 15 years now. And about 6 months ago, we were listening to Hermes Trismegistus, and he talked about, he said, originally, God created 12 souls, and each soul could split into many different souls. And, well, for instance, one of the questions when I interviewed Mary, Mother Mary, I said, was it true that you were also known as Kuan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of compassion? And she was silent for about 30 seconds, and she said, yes, but we're now two different souls. We're not the same soul that just had different lifetimes. I said, okay, that makes sense to me. So anyway, Gabriel, we had a talk with Gabriel about 6 months ago, and he talked about the 12 original souls. And I asked him, I said, so, I've been talking to Spirit. I've sat in classes taught by Spirit for 40 years, since I was 11, till I was 51. And I've worked with a lot of different trance mediums and folks like that. I said, but never have I heard about there being 12 original souls. I said, does that mean every soul that's on the earth right now, and it's almost 8 billion, and every soul in the spirit world, I don't know how many billions is there, came from one of these original 12? And he said, yes, that's true. He said they can create 144, and again, this factor of 12 shows up a lot in spiritual level. But he said they can create 144 souls from their soul energy itself. And so anyway, so that's been fascinating. And we heard from Toth. He was one of the original 12 souls. We heard from him 2 months ago. Amazing. And this guy, Osri, he will be our speaker again on this Thursday night. And we get to ask him, any questions we want. And again, I'm very interested in knowing about when those 12 souls were created, how many billions of years ago. And then, and like I said, apparently I've asked many times, I've gotten the same answer. There are no new souls being created. So anyway, as far as Steve Woods goes, in my opinion, he's one of the best deep trance mediums I've ever experienced.